a trained electronic engineer. I've been working on health effects from cell phones and other forms of radio frequency radiation for decades. I'm working on a book. It's called The Telecom Industry's Hidden Secret. It should be out in the next 6 months or so. And it covers all of the science studies in a lay language presentation that have found cancers from cell phone use. It also has collaborative data that is, if it's been found with cell phone use, you also find that incidence rates are increasing, which is not necessarily direct evidence, but it's collaborative evidence. And it goes on through quite a few chapters.
That's something industry will challenge, of course.
Of course they will. And actually, they would be stupid, because what it does is bring more publicity to the book, which I would love, but it doesn't matter. I'm doing this just because I think it's necessary.
Right. And what have we learned here at this conference that's so important that other physicians should listen to?
Well, I must say that what I hear from when physicians are talking about, 2/3 of it is over my head, but I'm very impressed by the physicians and their carefulness and their checklists and their successes that they've found.
And what hope is there for people with electrosensitivity?
Well, it appears to be, and I'm not sure, but with the right physician who really knows something about it, it's actually curable.
And tell me a bit about yourself, how you became interested in all this.
Well, it began when I went to lunch with a work colleague in an electronic company I was at lunch, and I had a 45-minute grand mal seizure during that lunch. That put me to the closest hospital, where they put me in a CAT scan, and the cardiologist on duty say, "You have a massive brain tumor."
When was this?
It was 1994. So I was actually spent 10 days before they could operate, because if you take a meningioma that's about this size, it's squishing the brain's swelling, and though I didn't quite appreciate what would happen if they didn't get the swelling down was the brain would herniate, meaning it pushes down into your brain stem, and it's called death. When I asked my neurosurgeon, why don't we just have this operation now? He said, well, if we did that, your brain would end up all over the operating room. Which is probably an overstatement, but I got the idea. So after 10 days, we had the operation. I went home in 4 days. It took me 4 months to really recover. But during that time, because I had, when I asked my neurosurgeon, why did I get this thing? He said, perhaps electromagnetic fields. I had never heard that. I worked since I was a high school ham radio operator. I was always in the electronics industry. Never, ever heard anything other than electrical shocks killing you that would be harmful.
Did you use a cell phone a lot?
I have never actually had a cell phone, and that's not because I'm paranoid about them. I don't even understand why people want them. I mean, why have conversations with people all the time? I have a home phone. It has a message machine. If I'm not there, people can leave me a message. I call them back. I get lots of robocalls, which I just delete.
But so it wasn't from the cell phone that you got brain cancer if you didn't use one?
No. Oh, yeah. What I went and did, and all I knew at that point was it was magnetic fields. This was really early on. So I went not only to every work site. You move around about every 5 years in the electronics industry, where I had been and how I used those facilities. But I also measured my home. And what I found was I had a 14 milligauss field at my pillow for 30 years. and that's a known cause anyway of tumors, but it was from a clock radio that was immediately next to my head, within 4 inches. I did a lot of traveling after going back to work, and what you find in every hotel room is clock radios, and I had a magnetic field meter with me, and they all measured 0. And what happens, in this case it was a Sony product, but it was a choice the engineers made when they were designing it. You take the wires, if you keep them close together, the currents are equal and opposite, and there's no fields. But what they had done, I assume, I didn't even open it up, I was just got rid of the thing in sheer anger, is if it just goes and they separate, then you get a lot of strong fields. This was also true of electric blankets at the time. The electric blanket industry didn't say anything, but they changed the wiring through the electric blankets so that the wires always stayed together and all you got was heating, no fields. And so most likely, but not provable, is that it came from that clock radio. I mean, 14 milligauss field is enormously high.
Yeah. And tell me a bit about your work. You work with the Brain Tumor Registry.
I'm on the board of the Central Brain Tumor Registry in the United States. I'm also a senior research fellow for Environmental Health Trust. I do a lot of I've published papers. I send out large numbers of people documents that I think are important. The most recent one is the first ever, at least in the United States, the Chicago Tribune wrote an in-depth article about the cancers being caused by cell phone use. And so I've sent that out to lots and lots of people. Also, there was an op-ed piece that Deborah did following that. So I send it to myself in this blind copy to perhaps hundreds of people.
The Tribune measured, actually, they paid a lab to measure the emissions, from the phones?
Well, what you have, and I read their thing very careful, I come from industry. What you do in industry is if you're receiving, in this case, data, which the FCC would receive, you double check it if it's true, just a sampling. And it keeps the people that are transferring that information honest. They don't do it. They don't even know about it, though it's standard practice in all manufacturing, whether it's electronic or otherwise.
Can you explain the SAR test, how it's done?
Well, you basically what they do is they measure the. Well, I'm going to back up for a moment. The cell phone companies give a model, one, to a company that goes through a process of measuring the output of the cell phone. And in this news article, some of them were 10-fold larger than allowed, yet they reported it at the exposure limit, not 10 times larger. And that's, in essence, a conflict of interest. If they were to report that the cell phone company is making ones, they would get fired, okay? And there is just no corrective system at all. And you can just lie about your results, which I'm not saying they lied, maybe they just took a wrong measurement or whatever, but it's insane. I don't know any other word for it.
So
there's no check in the system to confirm that what is told is true.
And this famous SAR test, the specific absorption rate, is even challenged as not really relating to regular use by children, for example,
well,
of a cell phone.
Yes, and fields decreases the square of the distance away from you. So if you're just this much further away, which I consider 100 times further than keeping it against your head, that's a 10,000-fold reduction in the amount of radiation you're absorbing. Cell phones can be what I call safe enough. We all know cars are not safe, but they are safe enough. It's not like you have to abandon them, but you have to have a whole different procedure. The other thing that cell phones have is large magnetic fields. from
60 hertz?
From the batteries.
60 hertz?
Yes. Well, no, it would be already DC.
It's a DC.
Yeah, but the wires are, if the wires are close together, I'm repeating myself, they cancel each other. But what they're doing, and they don't call them wires on printed circuit boards, they're called traces, but just the same vocabulary. But they do not keep them close together, and they could. All that is, you just have to tell engineers. Engineers are quite capable of doing all sorts of things. If you just say in a design specification, the battery current wires should stay in close proximity to each other at all times.
Have you considered at the Environmental Health Trust publishing the best and the worst phones so the public would know?
I don't do that. I don't want to look at all the phones and stuff. But Environmental Health Trust has done a great job of. I mean, there's so many phones out there, but I mean they can already tell you the best and the worst.
Well, Professor,
and there are other there are other organizations that do the same.
PhoneGate Alert did publish the list of the French testing. They had, I think, 240 models which were over the limit.
Yes, and they got them to fix them. You know, they got sent back. In the United States, it's just ignored. There's no feedback at all. And Mark Arazi, who was his champion doing this, is a personal hero of mine. I've never met him in person, but I'm going to a meeting in Germany next month, and then I'll be delighted to meet him in person.
Well, say hello to Mark for me.
I will.
Okay. Thanks very much, Lloyd.
You're welcome.